This is Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyate Siddharane. Today we're going to read from the Nectar of Instruction. And generally speaking, the purports in the Nectar of Instruction are quite long. So I'm probably not going to be able to read the whole purport, but we'll read part of it. So this is verse number 7. Sat Krishna Nama Charitadi Siddhakti Vidya Pito Patapta Rasanasya Narochikanu Kinvadarat Anuvinam Kalasaiva Tushta Swadvi Kramat Bhavati Tad Gada Mulahandri. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. Srila Prabhupada's purport: the holy name of Lord Krishna, his quality, pastimes, and so forth, are all of the nature of absolute truth, beauty, and bliss. Naturally, they are very sweet, like sugar candy, which appeals to everyone. Nescience, however, is compared to the disease called jaundice, which is caused by bilious secretions. Attacked by jaundice, the tongue of a diseased person cannot palatably relish sugar candy. Rather, a person with jaundice considers something sweet and tastes very bitter. Avidya, ignorance, simply perverts the ability to relish the transcendently palatable name, quality, form, and pastimes of Krishna. Despite this disease, if one with great care and attention takes the Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy name and hearing Krishna's transcendental pastimes, his ignorance will be destroyed and his tongue enabled to taste the sweetness of the transcendental nature of Krishna and his paraphernalia. Such a recovery of spiritual health is possible only by the regular cultivation of Krishna consciousness. At the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has explained that all of us, we're all spiritual beings, transcendental to the material energy. And the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, at least most of it, is an explanation of why we're currently in the material existence under the influence of the three material modes of nature. As a matter of fact, Arjuna, in the 3rd chapter, he asks Krishna, why is it that I want to do the right thing? I want to do my duty, what I think I'm supposed to do, but somehow or another, I'm forced to act, seemingly forced to act, in a way which is incorrect, which I know I'm not supposed to be doing. So, as we probably know, Krishna answers that it is lust only, Arjuna. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajaguna, samudbhava, mahashano mahapatma, vidinam ihavarina. Although we're spiritual beings, we can be influenced by the material energy. although the material nature has no direct influence on us, in the sense that it cannot force us to do anything, because we're actually not doing anything except for desiring. But because we have free will, we can desire mistakenly according to what the material nature is offering us. Or we can change our determination and desire what Krishna is offering us. But one who's not Krishna conscious, one who's not experiencing the happiness of Krishna consciousness, will have to taste the experience of the three modes of material nature. And the experience of the material nature means we have three varieties: goodness, passion, ignorance, as well as a mixture of all of them. So being surrounded, our consciousness being surrounded by the material energy, we think that sometimes we think that the spiritual nature is not very pleasant, especially when we're chanting Hare Krishna. Then we think that this is quite difficult, this chanting. It is almost like during spring cleaning, after the winter of sweeping all the dust underneath the rug, and then we want to clean in spring, and we lift the rug up and all the dust comes out. And we start thinking that cleaning is the cause of the dust. But the cleaning is only making us aware of how much dust there already is. Similarly, because of long desiring material sense gratification, the chanting of Hare Krishna is a direct challenge to our material desires. And therefore, we become more aware of what our motivations are, what our determinations are, what our desires are. And therefore, we become more aware of, in one sense, of the material existence in the three modes. Therefore, Krishna says that the material nature is influencing us in two ways. One is it covers our actual consciousness, and therefore we see things in a way which is not actual or factual or real. Just like when one puts on glasses that are colored, say yellow colored glasses, and looks through them, then it appears that everything is yellow. But everything is not yellow. We're only perceiving everything as yellow because of the glasses we have on. So when we put on the material body and mind and intelligence, which is colored by the three modes of material nature, therefore we have a distorted conception of reality, which, because of Krishna's expertise, appears very real to us, although it has no factual existence. Because material nature is obviously real, but our conception of it is unreal. Our conception or our perception of what's going on is simply because of the modes that we're conditioned by. And because we're conditioned by those modes, therefore Krishna says in the next verse that avritam jnana etena jnano nityavarena kamarupena kuntya dusprena analena cha. Thus a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So the material nature was never meant to be pleasant. If we're thinking I should work in order to make my life more pleasant, it's almost like trying to get a good book to read in the midst of our house burning down. maybe we can find a good book, which is enjoyable, but it's not very pleasant if we're reading it in a house that's burning down. Similarly, trying to be happy in the material existence is a futile attempt because the very material existence is unpleasant. Generally speaking, when one is in the mode of ignorance, one is unaware of how unpleasant it is. For instance, when a hog is living in its pigsty, for the hog, life is heaven. In America, they call it hog heaven. Because after all, the hog has nothing to worry about. The rent's free. There's no hog who has a mortgage on his pigsty. There's plenty of food. It's being supplied daily and fresh. And it's in abundance. Enough for his whole family and the neighbors also. He doesn't have to educate his children. They already know how to eat stool very nicely. He doesn't have to worry about getting fat. There's no hog who's ever went on a diet, no matter how big it got. It doesn't have to worry about following any principles. As a matter of fact, the only principle it follows is that it doesn't follow any principle. And it thinks it's very happy. His wife is beautiful. He's in love with her tail, how nicely it's curved. Children are all healthy and strong. And Prabhupada gives the example of when Indra was cursed to become a hog. And being a hog on this earthly planet, it was quite content. Indra was thinking, this is better than heaven. In heaven, I have so many responsibilities, but here I can sleep all day and no one disturbs me. And when I get up, the food is right by my mouth. I can just chomp on a few fresh pieces and then go back to sleep. This is hog heaven. Unfortunately for Indra, there was some disruption in the heavenly planets. So Brahma was requested to bring Indra back to heaven. Brahma came down to this earthly planet, saw Indra in the form of a hog, and requested him to come back to heaven and resume his responsibilities. But Indra refused, saying that this is better than heaven. My wife has a fantastic shape. My children are all healthy. Food is fresh. I have no responsibilities here except for eating, sleeping, mating, defending. This is perfect life. This is the essence of life. So Brahma did not accept Indra's answer. And he took out his sword and told Indra, you must come back. Still Indra refused. So Brahma cut off the heads of Indra's pig wife, pig children, and said to Indra, you're next. So Indra reconsidered and so thought, well, maybe it's not a bad idea to go back to heaven. So similarly, whatever situation we're in, we become attached to. Even a worm in stool, however abominable his life may be, if you try to take the worm out of the stool, he'll protest. Why are you disturbing me? My comfortable life. Therefore, being covered by ignorance, we're actually thinking ourselves be doing fairly well. Maybe a few improvements here and there might be necessary, but other than that, we have something to eat, a place to sleep, etc. what more could we ask for? So this is called the covering of Maya, Avarangaka Shakti. And then there's Prakatmika Shakti. Maya will impel us through the senses, the pushing of the senses, to do something to gratify them, which we call happiness. But when we stop trying to gratify our senses, then we experience the pushing of the senses. And that's very unpleasant. As Krishna says, its lust is never satisfied and it burns like fire. So when we chant Hare Krishna and we're not gratifying our senses, but we're actually trying to pay attention, then we may experience the fire of material desire pushing us to gratify our senses. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Tani sarvani karmani, tani samani samyamya, yukta sitamatpara, vishehi yasyandriyani tasya pragya pratishtita. One who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is to be known as a man of steady intelligence. So this requires some aloofness, some faith, because right now we're covered by ignorance, and therefore we don't perceive Krishna directly, nor do we perceive the spiritual world in fullness, nor do we see anything in the material world accurately. But if we have some faith by hearing, then we can understand the desirability of restraining our senses from unwanted activities. As Prabhupada writes at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, as I mentioned before, that one lady requested Prabhupada when he was in America to recommend an edition of the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada said, I can't recommend any edition because every edition that I've seen, and there are many, they do not agree with the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita. They give their own interpretations. So Prabhupada mentions that if we want to take a medicine, then we have to take it according to the directions on the label or according to the directions of an expert physician. We cannot take it according to our own whim. We cannot go to the drugstore, look at the bottles of medicine on the shelf, and determine which color of medicine we like, which matches our sari or our dhoti, and then take that medicine. We have to find an expert doctor or physician, or read the label on the medicine bottle to ascertain which is an appropriate medicine. Similarly, the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is that it's spoken by Krishna. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells us that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, in the material world, everyone thinks he's God. That's why we're in the material world. So why shouldn't Krishna also say he's God? Because everyone else is saying it also. But that's not the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. The spirit of the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna says he's God and everyone else is his servant. Of course, everyone would like to be in that position also in the material world. But at least that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And he spends the Bhagavad Gita trying to explaining that. How he's the supreme person, how he's moving the sun and the moon, how he's in everyone's heart as a super soul, how he's giving everyone remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, how all of us are transcendental, and that the aim of life is to realize who we are by realizing our relation with Krishna. Now, as Prabhupada goes on, every one of us has an eternal relation with Krishna, and therefore, for that reason, Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita to bring us back or revive our relationship with him. But if we want to get any value from reading Bhagavad Gita, or for that matter, any other of the books that Prabhupada has translated or commentated upon. We have to accept, at least theoretically, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that Srila Prabhupada is his bona fide representative. Otherwise, why would we follow Krishna if we think, or Srila Prabhupada's commentaries, if we think they're just ordinary personalities? Now, of course, Arjuna, he tells Krishna, he accepts Krishna as God because great personalities such as Vyasadeva, Narada, Asita, and later on Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sankaracharya, they all accepted Krishna as God. Unfortunately, we may not accept any of these people as authorities. Plus, Brahma Samhita, Srimad Bhagavatam, they also declare Krishna as God. Of course, we can read these books, and if we follow the book, if we chant, if we read carefully with care and attention, we may get some other experience, some other revelations, we could say. We can understand more clearly that we're eternal, that this universe is under superior control. These things can be understood intellectually, at least. But the bottom line is that even though we may perceive something about the validity of the Vedic literature, indeed, in Germany, those under Hitler, they actually went to India and they were quite interested in the Vedic literature, not to surrender to Krishna, though. I don't think any of either Adolf Hitler or his followers were chanting 16 rounds a day. Matter of fact, I don't think they were chanting japa at all, although they studied the Vedic literature. But they studied it in order to figure out how to conquer the world. And that's not an unusual theme for those who study the Vedic literature. As a matter of fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Krishna book, we find many asuras taking shelter of the Vedas. For instance, when Krishna killed Kasiraj and his friend who was imitating himself, imitating Krishna. What was the name of the person who was imitating Krishna? Begins with a P. He dressed himself as Vasudev, and he had false.
Pundarik.
Who?
Pundarik.
Pundarik. Okay, so Pundarik.
Paundraka. No, it was Pundrik something.
I don't think he was imitating Krishna. Pundraka. So Pundraka, he was imitating Krishna, and he challenged Krishna to a fight to see who would be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna was very surprised, such a foolish person. And indeed, it is said that the members of the assembly, headed by Ugrasena in Dwarka, after hearing Pundraka's challenge, they laughed for a very long time. And then Krishna immediately called for his chariot and his army and went to the city of Kasiraj, where Pundraka was staying. Pundraka and Kasi, King Kasi, Kasiraj, came out from the city and challenged Krishna. Krishna took a Sudarshan chakra and cut off the head of Pundraka. He also cut off the head of Kasiraj. And just like the wind blows a leaf, So Krishna, Sudarshan Chakra, took the head into the city of Kasi, which is known as Varanasi now. There, the members of Kasi Raja's family and the relatives and the citizens of Kasi, they came to see whose head it was that was thrown into the city. They thought perhaps that Kasi Raj had cut off Krishna's head and that he had thrown it into the city so all the citizens could take delight in Kasi Raj having defeated Krishna. But much to their surprise, they saw Kasi Raj's head instead of Krishna's head. Kasi Raj had a son, his name was Sudarshana, and Sudarshana wanted to take revenge against Krishna and his relatives, having killed his father. So he did great austerity for some time to appease Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva became pleased with him and told him how to perform a sacrifice in order to revenge his father's death. Sudarshana performed the sacrifice, and indeed a big demon came out, completely black, with eyes fiery like copper, red hot copper, with a big mustache, huge demon of fire. That's after the Vedic priests performed the sacrifice. So following the Vedic knowledge, one could produce the spiritual world, or one could produce a demon like Sudarshana's priests had produced. Of course, Sudarshana told fiery demon to go to Dwarka and destroy it. As we know, he was unsuccessful. As a matter of fact, Krishna threw his Sudarshan Chakra at this fiery demon, and the Sudarshan Chakra was many times hotter than the demon, so the demon became very cold and went back to Varanasi or Kasi. And because, according to Vedic knowledge, according to the Vedic law, that if a demon is created to kill someone and it doesn't kill the intended object, it comes back and kills the creator, which Sudarshana's creation did, came back, burned Sudarshana and all his priests to ashes, and then later on burnt the city of Kasi to ashes. In other words, the Vedic literature, Nigama Kalpataru Kaliyam Balam, is like a desire tree, and one can get whatever one wants from it. It is actual knowledge that can produce tangible effects in the material world. But without knowledge of Krishna, without taking shelter of Krishna, all the knowledge is shramam eva hi kevalam. It's just a waste of time. Therefore, the very essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the very essence of the Vedic literature, which Bhagavad Gita is the essence, is yomam evam asamudo janati purushottama sasarvavit vijantemam sarabhavena bharata. That this is the most, anyone, yomam evam asamudo, anyone who knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is said to be the knower of everything, and therefore engages himself in full devotional service. Iti guyatamam shastram idam yukva mayanaga etam bhutva buddhimatsyat krita kritaschavarata. That this is the most confidential of all the knowledge of all the Vedic literature. That anyone who knows this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So the very essence of all the Vedic literature is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he's Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. That all beauty, all knowledge, all fame, all renunciation, all strength, all fame, everything is coming from Krishna, including the material energy that we're experiencing around us. It is all a product of Krishna's energies. And we're attracted to it because it reminds us of Krishna to some degree. Because it's not different from Krishna, because it's his energy, therefore it has some of Krishna's attractiveness. The problem is when we're being compelled to try to enjoy it, because we're not capable of enjoying it, we become frustrated. Just like if one is very thirsty and sees a mirage in the desert and runs after it, there's some hope that the mirage will quench our thirst. So being in the material world, there are so many mirages that are being presented before us by the illusory energy, and we're running after them, hoping that they will satisfy our desire for happiness, for love, security, peace, friendship, etc. So we're being impelled by Maya to run after the mirages in the material existence. Of course, in these mirages, there may be one drop of water, and somehow or another, being very thirsty, even we consider even one drop of water to be better than nothing. On the other hand, if one understands that what we're actually missing is Krishna, then one can tolerate Vishaheta these urges of the senses, and try to focus one's consciousness upon Krishna, especially when we're chanting Hare Krishna. Therefore, two things are necessary. One is that we should appreciate our fallen condition, that we're neither was the Supreme, and even in comparison, and even considering reality, we're not in a very comfortable position. It doesn't matter how many titles we have, how strong we are in the material world, how intelligent we may imagine ourselves to be, how young and beautiful we consider ourselves or others consider ourselves. Ultimately, we're not the body, and the body was not given to us for our enjoyment. It was given to us in the human form of life for service to Krishna. And if we utilize it for service to Krishna, then we might get out of our problems. We might get another experience other than the frustration coming from running after mirages in the desert and only getting one drop of water instead of an ocean of happiness that we're looking for. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it's said that which in the beginning may be bitter like poison, and the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. One of the principal themes in the Bhagavad Gita is tolerance. That's the bridge between material existence and spiritual experience. Tolerating the misconceptions that are flowing through our minds, the allurements for happiness that Maya is presenting to us, creating a whole situation where helping us believe or offering us opportunities for happiness in the material world, which ultimately lead simply to frustration. Therefore, although we may be jaundiced by avidya and therefore dissatisfied, still we have to have some faith, at least theoretically, accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then when he says we're eternal, it makes sense. When he says that there's a person controlling the universe, it makes sense. When we understand our dependency upon Krishna, that Krishna can in a moment reveal himself to us, or he may not do so for millions of years. It only depends upon our developing a sincere desire to choose Krishna over Maya. Now, the fact that we're here in the material world, that we have this body that we're living in right now, means that we chose Maya in the past over Krishna, at least to some extent. Of course, we're fortunate because we've come in contact with a pure devotee such as Srila Prabhupada, who's given us directions in his books, how we can tolerate the urges of the senses and focus our minds upon Krishna, and how Krishna and his name, his form, his quality, his pastimes, and his associates are all non-different from him. Indeed, there's nothing but Krishna. And how if we focus our attention and give our love to the holy name, that holy name, according to our sincerity, will become pleased with us and gradually reveal himself to us, so that we become more attracted to the spiritual energy than to the material nature. And when we become completely attracted to this spiritual nature and become aloof from the material nature, then we become liberated from all our problems. So Prabhupada writes here that recovery of spiritual health is possible if we take the Krishna consciousness, and that's principally by chanting the holy name and hearing Krishna's transcendental pastimes. Now, the chanting of the holy name is a cry to Lord Krishna and his spiritual energy to engage us in his loving service. It is not a cry for salvation from material problems. Of course, in the beginning, our main objective in the material world, everyone's main objective, is to solve problems. So we're long accustomed to trying to solve material problems because there's enough problems. In fact, the whole material world is a problem. And the main problem is that we think we're going to die. All the other problems are all subsidiary to that one problem, that we think I had a beginning when I was born. Now I'm growing older. My body doesn't work the same way. I'm less at ease, more diseased. And it appears that it's possible that even a nice person like me, who might even die, although it's probably not very likely because we're a nice person. Therefore, probably some exception will be made in our case, and we won't have to leave this body. We'll be here at the end of Kali Yuga to welcome Satya Yuga. But that's very unlikely that we're going to live in this body for very much longer, and therefore most of our efforts in the material world is simply to survive, which is impossible, at least not in this body. But we will survive because we're eternal, although the body that we're in is always disappearing, one after another. But we'll survive. The question is where we're going to go after we leave this body. Therefore, if one has faith, at least theoretically, that Krishna's name and himself are non-different, and that if we chant Hare Krishna and try to develop the desire to engage in his loving service, not just to get free from our problems. When we're in distress, naturally we want to get out of distress. When we're living comfortably, naturally we want to maintain our comfort, protect it. When we're curious, we want to have our curiosity satisfied. And when we realize the fact that we're eternal and that we can live happily eternally, then we want to realize our eternality. So these are different stages, and we may use the holy name either to get out of distress, to live more comfortably, to gain knowledge of how to live in the material world free from anxiety, or how to liberate ourselves in Brahman. But the holy name is meant to take us beyond Brahman. As a matter of fact, the actual chanting of the holy name can only begin when we're actually not interested in our material attachments for comfort or interested in salvation from material existence. The chanting of the holy name can only be actually realized when we have faith that there's another world that we belong in called the spiritual existence that's accessible when we ask Srimati Radharani and Krishna sincerely to engage us in their loving service. So what that loving service is can only be revealed by them, and therefore we have to develop this understanding of our fallen condition, that we don't really know what pure devotional service is, and that we're dependent upon Krishna, Srimati Radharani, and their pure representatives to reveal what our actual existence is like. And therefore chant Hare Krishna in that attitude, Prabhupada used to say, is like a child calling for its mother. Now, a child obviously doesn't think itself to be fairly self-sufficient. The child doesn't think, well, actually, in my last lifetime, I had a big bank balance. I did my exercises every day. I took my vitamin pills. I had a life insurance policy. So surely, if my mother and father become neglectful, surely I can remember where my bank account is and take shelter of it. No, the child has no other resource. It realizes that it has no other shelter than the protection of its parents. And therefore, when it feels itself in difficulty, it cries for its parents with great feelings of separation and dependency. And indeed, if the parents are affectionate and loving, then the child also has a sense of feeling love and separation from its parents. In the same way, we're chanting Hare Krishna and trying to develop the feeling of dependency upon Krishna and the holy names. We're trying to give up our feeling of dependency upon material arrangements to make us happy and satisfied and secure. Then if we are able to develop that dependency by carefully chanting Hare Krishna with care and attention, and if Krishna sees our sincerity in trying to take shelter of Srimati Radharani and himself through his representatives, then the result is that Krishna may reveal himself to us through the holy name, or by giving us more intelligence to understand our position properly. Then gradually there can be a regaining of spiritual health. Material nature is compared to a disease. Of course, people think they have a very nice disease. Prabhupada says that one lady, was sick, wealthy lady, so she called for the doctor to come. The doctor came and took her temperature and found out it was 103 degrees. But it was actually also apparent that the maid was also sick. So the doctor took her temperature and found out it was 104 degrees. So the lady who owned the house, had the maidservant, she began to complain, why is it that my maidservant has 104, I only have 103? That's not proper. I should have 105. So over in the material world, and we see others who are anxious to get more and more material happiness through material acquisitions. And we're envious of them. Why are they enjoying more than I am? Why is their fever 104 and mine is only 103? Something wrong with the process. Mine should be 105. But we should understand that the more we become dependent upon, feel ourselves to be dependent upon Krishna, and allow Krishna to help us utilize his material energy to engage us in his spiritual service, and not see anything beyond that as being that important. Whatever energy Krishna gives us, we're able to use it in Krishna's service, knowing well that everything belongs to Krishna and is meant for his service. Then gradually our fever of material desire will diminish. And if we think what I'm missing is not enough material nature, not enough fame, not enough wealth, not enough personal beauty or influence, and if I get that, then I'll actually be able to become Krishna conscious. The Prabhupada used to say, if you simply distribute my books, then everything else will come naturally, automatically, by Krishna's arrangement. And sometimes some devotees think that if I simply get everything I need, or I think I need, then I'll be able to distribute Prabhupada's books eventually. As if Krishna is a poor man, and that we have to collect enough to support him. Poor deity. By my mercy, he exists, and he gets fed every day. And without my mercy, Krishna is going to starve. Therefore, we have to make so many other arrangements to serve the deity, to serve the devotees, other than serving Krishna's desires. But the fact is that our first business is to regularly cultivate Krishna consciousness, and then everything else will follow. And if we cultivate everything else, except for Krishna consciousness, then only more problems will follow by Krishna's arrangement. That we can see in modern society. People are endeavoring greatly and sincerely to solve problems, but all they're doing is creating more problems, because they don't know that the actual solution is to take shelter of Krishna. That their only problem is the fact that they imagine themselves to have problems that they actually don't have, and they think that the imaginary the problems that they themselves are creating can be solved by creating more problems. So this is due to their lack of Krishna consciousness, but at least we ourselves should develop some at least theoretical faith in Krishna and the process, especially chanting Hare Krishna, and understanding how even this material world is also one of Krishna's pastimes. It's a pastime to help the conditioned souls, including ourselves, take shelter of him by one side experiencing the sweetness of the holy name, and the other side experiencing the bitterness of material existence. So both have to go side by side to help ourselves and the other conditioned souls get out of material existence, taste the bitterness of material existence and the sweetness of spiritual existence. But we ourselves were trying to concentrate more on tasting the sweetness of spiritual existence by carefully chanting the holy name and hearing Srila Prabhupada's books, so we can understand and recognize how this existence we're in is also part of Krishna's pastimes. Krishna has not abandoned us, nor is he aloof from us. He's simply assisting us in ways that apparently are not very pleasant sometimes, but are necessary for our spiritual advancement. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Nitya Siddha, that was quick. Nitya Seva.
Yeah, because I was waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, Gurudev Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances, all Guru Srila Prabhupada.
I was just wondering about this when you were telling about this pastime, this Pondrika Wala pastime, and but King Kashi, the king of Kashi, was killed, and then his son actually wanted to take revenge, so he went to Lord Shiva, and then Lord Shiva told him some some method or tapasya to take revenge from Krishna, right? So I'm thinking, why would Lord Shiva give any recommendation or some solution to take revenge from Krishna? Because after all, he knows that nobody can win from the Lord, because he's the supreme personality. So why would somebody give this kind of recommendation?
Lord Shiva is Ashutosh. He doesn't want to be bothered by people. But he's also one of the three predominating deities of the material modes. He's in charge of ignorance. When you're in charge of ignorance, you don't expect intelligent, sane persons to come to you. You expect the lowest of man to come to you, generally speaking. Completely in ignorance, unknowing Krishna's power. So Lord Shiva, he wants to get rid of them because he doesn't really want to bother with them. So he offers benedictions. But that's his duty, that's his business, that's what he's there for. Otherwise, the Asuras, they went to Lord Shiva and said, and Lord Shiva started to give them a lecture on Krishna's power. Then the Asuras, where would they go to realize how powerful Krishna is? Where would they take shelter? Brahma wouldn't give them any shelter, or maybe not so easily as Lord Shiva, and certainly Lord Vishnu wouldn't give them shelter. So that's why Lord Shiva is there. Krishna puts him there to satisfy the desires of the demons, because Krishna has arranged material nature in order to give everyone an opportunity to satisfy their desires, whether material or spiritual. So Lord Shiva is that person that Krishna's put in that service to give them, to satisfy their desires. Although Lord Shiva may know that they're wasting their time, but then again, everyone else in the material world is also wasting their time, no matter what they're desiring, if it's not in Krishna consciousness. So Lord Shiva does his business, and indeed sometimes he even comes as Sankaracharya and spreads Mayavadi philosophy, because that's what people want. But Lord Shiva also knows that ultimately, by becoming frustrated, by not being able to fulfill their desires the way they want, eventually even the Asuras will turn to Krishna and become Krishna conscious. Enough experience in the material world. If people can't learn by hearing, then hopefully they can learn by experience. Otherwise, the learning process may take a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Julia Nyatra Devidasi.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. Я на русском задам вопрос. Можно? Гуру Махарадж, скажите, пожалуйста, если я разумом понимаю, что Кришна, он защитит, и все происходит по его плану, но иногда, вот находясь в стране, где происходит война, я испытываю огромный страх, и мое сознание сковано, и я в это время, мне сложно думать о Кришне, и доверять ему иногда сложно. Подскажите, как правильно научиться доверять Господу полностью, даже в состоянии страха, за свою жизнь?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I will translate for the English-speaking audience. Okay. So I theoretically, I understand that Krishna will protect me, but I'm in the country which is at war, and I'm afraid. And when I'm frightened, it's very difficult for me to trust Krishna or even remember. So how do you learn? Could you please explain to me, how do I trust Krishna completely and remember him even in the time of the fear or distress?
Well, we're never going to be able to just automatically remember Krishna all the time. Therefore, we may have to learn by experience. Obviously, you are remembering Krishna sometimes in the midst of the fear and distress. And it's only a question of how much fear and distress you have to go through before your remembrance of Krishna increases. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation which is very unpleasant and it causes you to remember Krishna, then you're following the footsteps of great personalities such as Queen Kunti and the Pandavas and others were put into very distressful circumstances, but were able to eventually appreciate how advantageous those difficulties were, because to some extent or another, it helped them remember Krishna. We may think that those who are better situated in the material world, they're more fortunate than we are. But everything is arranged perfectly according to what our past activities are. Tatenu kampam susamikshamano unjana evatma kritam vipakam vidvagvapu virvi vidanmanaste viveta yo ukti sade sadayava. That everything is being perfectly arranged by Krishna. And a devotee, when he's in difficulty, in difficult situations, because he has the association of Krishna and his devotees, therefore he understands that it's not by accident that I was put into such a situation. It was due to my past misdeeds. And as much as I can, under these circumstances, take shelter of Krishna, then I'm making great spiritual advancement so that one day I can inherit my rightful place in the spiritual kingdom and live eternally with Krishna and his ever blissful associates there. So devotee by knowledge, although we may not be so capable of always remembering Krishna under all circumstances, but we should see this as an opportunity, however unpleasant it may be, as remembering Krishna much more sincerely, taking shelter of Krishna much more sincerely. When all the other shelters are non-existent, then we only have one shelter left, which is the holy name, and that's the real shelter ultimately. As Prabhupada was saying on a morning walk one time, in Mayapur, Prabhupada mentioned about the next war, how it was going to be between two countries. And all the devotees were very disturbed that, so Prabhupada mentioned, he said, what is the solution? He said, there is no solution. He said, either you die today or you die in 20 years, you're going to die. So what Prabhupada said, the real solution is to chant Hare Krishna. That's the only solution. So if it takes some very unpleasant circumstances to help us come to that conclusion, then those very unpleasant circumstances are welcome, because they're helping us go back to the spiritual world. We don't have to desire them. Like Queen Kunti, we may be placed into them, but there's no sense of complaining about it. Which is, if you want to complain, complain to Krishna. But take shelter of Krishna one way or another. And then Krishna will give intelligence or whatever he wants. But ultimately, that's the only real protection we have, is to come back to our spiritual consciousness again. Rarani Dasi.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. My question is possibly in a relation with Julan Yatra Mataji's question, because I understand how people who went through some severe difficulties that created a lot of impressions in the mind, and may even later, after those difficulties, go easily into fight and flight mode instead of rest and digest, where people can more can use their logic and understand, comprehend. So, for example, to study Bhakti literature and just live normal, peaceful life, needs to be that presence in parasympathetic nervous system where all those things are possible, instead of fight and flight response, where there is a lot of stress, anxiety, and maybe anger and different emotions. So I see that few people can, and devotees can struggle with those things, especially at initial stages. And I myself have got some of that. So I see that, and I wanted to ask this question. So would that be helpful to learn different techniques that help person to bring that, to control the mind in a way of bringing it out of fight and flight mode into rest and digest mode, and just once you're in it, then can understand philosophy and participate in the services? Yeah, hope that was.
Sometimes necessary.
Sorry?
Just like we find in the Nectar devotion, there was one Brahmin who had heard that, because he was a very poor Brahmin, but he had heard that simply by meditating on Krishna's service, doing deity worship within your mind, that you could actually get the same benefit as if you personally did the deity worship directly. So the first thing he did after hearing those instructions on how to perform Manasa Seva, he went to a place and he sat down and did pranayama. So Prabhupada mentions that in the past, people were naturally instructed in pranayama and they knew how to control their minds in that way. So before he did his mental deity worship, he performed that pranayama.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of utilizing some techniques to help our devotional service. After all, Kardama Muni had meditated for 10,000 years on the Supreme Person. So he used a mechanical form of yoga in order to be able to meditate upon Krishna and realize him. So it depends. Some people are inclined that way, and some people, they naturally they're not interested in those things. So it depends on our interests. So sometimes we can utilize these things in Krishna's service, and sometimes people are not interested in those. They always aren't interested in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maharaj.
Agnihotra.
Харе Кришна, Гуру Махарадж. Спасибо вам большое за лекцию. У меня такой вопрос. Скажите, пожалуйста, что делать ученику, если его гуру проявляет признаки того, что он в двойственности и транслирует материалистичные концепции, и это подтверждают другие авторитеты на уровне GBC? Что делать в таком случае ученику?
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. It's a complicated question. Okay. I will try my best. Okay. So if a guru is preaching philosophy which is more materialistic and reflects the duality of the material world, and this kind of preaching has been confirmed to a disciple by a GBC and others, what this disciple to do?
Well, first of all, actual gurus don't preach materialism.
Во-первых, настоящий гуру не проповедует материализм.
In any case, if we think it's someone's incorrectly preaching to us, then apparently we have enough intelligence to understand what he should be preaching. And therefore, the best thing to do is to go to another authority and explain our situation, and hopefully they can resolve the situation, the problem. If we can't resolve it ourselves personally, we should go to someone who might be able to help us resolve it. But in any case, we should not become critical, thinking that now my initiating or instructing guru is giving me some information that I think is wrong. Therefore, now I can reject him, I can reject the process, and I can become a nonsense. No, the minimum that a devotee strives for, the minimum consciousness, is respecting within the mind, even when someone may be wrong. May be wrong. So therefore, our business is not to try to figure out how we're better than our guru or gurus, how we're better than others. It's to find out what Krishna wants us to do. After all, guru is simply there to assist us in finding out what Krishna is telling us within the heart so we can know what to do. If we do the right thing, then we get the credit. And if we find out that everyone else is doing the wrong, we think others are doing the wrong thing, that doesn't help us very much. We want to find out what the right thing is so we can do it. Okay, thank you very much. Spasibo Bolshoi. Grantaraj Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Ki Jai.
Why?
Prabhupada Ki Jai.